Hi everyone, our part of the presentation covers adjustment and anchoring. Our presentation is covered in 4 parts. First, an introduction to anchoring and adjustment. Then we discuss how anchors are formed, common biases in the evaluation of conjunctive and disjunctive events, and anchoring in the assessment of subjective probability distributions. In many situations, people make estimates by starting from an initial value and then adjusted to yield the final answer. The initial value, or starting point, may be suggested during the formulation of the problem, or it may be the result of a partial computation. In either case, adjustments are typically insufficient. That is, different starting points yield different estimates, which are biased towards the initial values. We call this phenomenon anchoring. In a classic demonstration of the anchoring effect, subjects were asked to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. However, participants were first provided with an arbitrary percentage which was determined by spinning a wheel of fortune in the subject's presence. The subjects were instructed to indicate first whether the number was higher or lower than the true value, and then to estimate the true value. These arbitrary numbers had a marked effect on estimates. For example, the median estimates of the percentage of African countries in the United Nations was estimated to be 25 and 42 for groups that received 10 and 65% respectively as their starting points. Further, payoffs for accuracy did not reduce the anchoring effect. The initial value or starting point may also be the result of partial computation. A study of intuitive numerical estimation illustrates this. Two groups of high school students were instructed to estimate within 5 seconds a numerical expression that was written on the blackboard. One group estimated the product of 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, while the other group estimated the product of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. To rapidly answer such questions, people may perform a few steps of computation and estimate the final answer via extrapolation or adjustment. The median estimate for the descending sequence was 2,250, while the median estimate for the ascending sequence was 512. The correct answer, however, was 40,320. So why then do people give different answers to the same question? Because adjustments are typically insufficient, the task overall leads to underestimation. However, because the first few steps of multiplication act as an anchor, the product of the initial multiplications are used as starting point for the estimation. For example, since 8 times 7 is 56, participants extrapolated their estimate to be a larger number, which is 2,250. But because the product of 1, 2, and 3 is only 6, participants gave a smaller estimation, which is 512. Anchoring is also known to cause common biases when evaluating conjunctive or disjunctive events. In a recent study by Hillel, subjects were given the opportunity to bet on one of two events. 3 types of events were used. First, simple events, such as the likelihood of drawing a red marble from a bag containing 50% red marbles and 50% white marbles. Second, conjunctive events, which are those that occur in a chain or in conjunction with one another, such as the likelihood of drawing a red marble 7 times in succession with replacement from a bag containing 90% red marbles and 10% white marbles. Third, disjunctive events, which are those that occur independently, such as the likelihood of drawing a red marble at least once in 7 successive tries, with replacement from a bag containing 10% red marbles and 90% white marbles. In this problem, a significant majority of subjects prefer to bet on the conjunctive event, which has a probability of 48%, rather than on the simple event, which has a probability of 50%. Similarly, subjects also prefer to bet on the simple event, which has a probability of 50%, than the disjunctive event, which has a probability of 52%. Thus, most subjects actually bet on the less likely event in both comparisons. This pattern of choice illustrates a general finding. That is, because success and failure, or failure at the starting point, acts as an anchor, and since adjustments are often insufficient, the final estimates remain too close to the initial assessments. This phenomenon explains why people tend to overestimate the probability of conjunctive events and underestimate the probability of disjunctive events. Because of anchoring, people will tend to underestimate the probabilities of failures in complex systems. Thus, the direction of the anchoring bias can sometimes be inferred from the structure of the event. The chain-like structure of conjunctions leads to overestimation of success, and the funnel-like structure of disjunctions leads to the underestimation of success. Anchoring is also known to affect the assessment of subjective probability distributions. Subjective probability distributions are a type of probability derived from an individual's personal judgment about whether specific outcomes are likely to occur. It contains no formal calculation and only reflects the subject's opinions and past experiences. In decision analysis, experts are often required to express their beliefs about a quantity, for example, the value of the Joe Downs average on a particular day, in the form of a probability distribution. Subjective probability distributions for a given quantity, such as the Dow Jones average, can be obtained in one of two different ways. First, by asking judges to predict the values that correspond with a given percentile. Or second, by asking judges to assess the probability that a true value would exceed a given estimate. These two procedures are formally equivalent and should yield identical distributions. In reality, however, they utilize different modes of adjustment from different anchors, thereby resulting in different distributions. In the experiment, in procedure 1, participants were tasked to estimate x90, a number which has a 90% probability of being higher than the Dow Jones average on a particular day. In this case, the natural starting point, or the participant's initial estimate, is their best estimate. In other words, there is no anchoring and adjustment. In the second procedure, participants in the second group were instructed to estimate the probability that the x90 value estimated by group 1 will exceed the true Dow Jones average on a particular day. In this case, the participant may be anchored on the value stated in the question, or anchored on the value stated by group 1, or anchored on 50-50 odds, which is a natural starting point in the estimation of likelihood. In contrast to their formally equivalent nature, procedure 2 should yield less extreme odds compared to procedure 1, and we will illustrate this in the following slides. In the experiment described by the paper, a set of 24 quantities, such as the air distance from New Delhi to Peking, was presented to group 1, or the red group, who assessed either x10 or x90 for each of the 24 quantities. x90 represents the number that participants believe is at the 90th percentile of all possible values. In other words, the participant accepts 9 to 1 odds that the Dow Jones average will not exceed In other words, the participant accepts a 9 to 1 odds that the Dow Jones average will not exceed the x90. Vice versa for x10, following which a median for all 24 values is calculated. Now, in Group 2 received the median judgment of the first group for each of the 24 quantities. They were then asked to assess the odds that each of the given values, the x10 or x90, exceeded the true value of the relevant quantity, such as the average Dow Jones value for the day. In the absence of any anchoring, the second group, or the blue group, should describe the odds similarly to that of the first group, or the red group. That is, they should indicate that the X90 estimated by the red group has 9 to 1 odds of being higher than the true or average value of Dow Jones for the day. However, what happens if even odds or the median value serve as anchors? In this case, the blue group would start their estimation from the median or the 50-50 point and adjust upward to X90. However, because adjustments tend to be insufficient, they are likely to determine the X90 value provided by the red group as more conservative or less extreme. This was found to be true in the experiment, where participants from the blue group perceived that the odds of the X90 value estimated by the red group had only had 3 to 1 odds of being larger than the true Dow Jones average score. In other words, what the red group considered to be at the 90th percentile, the blue group only considered to be at the 75th percentile. This was supported by external calibration, where it was found that subjects in the first group were too extreme, in accordance with earlier studies. The events that they defined as having a probability of 10% occurring actually had a 24, in reality had 24% chance of occurring in all cases. In contrast, the subjects in the second group were too conservative. Events which they assigned as having an average of 34% likelihood of occurring actually only occurred 26% of the time. And these results illustrate the manner in which the degree of calibration depends on the procedure of elicitation. We have some examples if there's not enough time. If not, that's the end of the presentation.